Hi, welcome to this ASMR for a nice fairy tale from the brothers Grimm named Hansel and Gretel. Just imagine a big forest. All you can see is trees, the leaves, the pines. Just imagine the smell of the wood, the pine needles, such lovely scents. Just picture that. Now, in this forest, there is a woodcutter living with his wife and two children. The boy, he was named Hansel, the girl Gretel. Once upon a time, there was a big drought. Food was scarce, and the man could no longer procure daily bread. He thought this over by night, tossing and turning, being anxious. He groaned, said to his wife, "Wife, what is to become of us? How are we going to feed our poor children when we no longer have anything for ourselves?" Just imagine the love between the two of them, the worry in his eyes and in his voice, trembling as he says those painful words. Wife answers, "I'll tell you what, husband. Early tomorrow morning, we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. Then let's light a fire for them and give it to them. We will give them a piece of bread and we will go to work. We will leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." The man was shocked when he heard those words from his loving wife. "No, wife," he said, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? You know, they are wild animals. They would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool," she said. Then all four of us must die of hunger. You may as well start making the planks for our coffins." She left him no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children all the same," he said. Now, in that small house, the children were in the room next to the parents, and they overheard the parents talking about them. Since they were hungry, they couldn't sleep anyhow, and the words from their stepmother shocked them. Gretel wept bitter tears. Hansel was also trembling. Gretel said, "It's all over with us." "Oh, be quiet, Gretel," Hansel said, trying to sound confident. "Do not distress yourself. I will soon find a way to help us." When the parents fell asleep again, he got up, put on his little coat with holes in it. He opened the door and crept outside. Just imagine the evening night and the moon shining brightly. It gave him such a lovely view, but the thoughts of his parents planning something that painful made it darker than it was. But yet he saw little white pebbles laying in front of the house, glittering like real silver pennies. He felt it was like a sign, and he stuffed the little pockets of his coat with as many as he could. Then he went back in. He said to Gretel, "Don't worry, little sister, sleep in peace. The Lord will not forsake us," he said as he lay down again in his bed. Both of them soon fell asleep, and when the day dawned, and before the sun had risen, the stepmother came in and woke the children, telling the sluggards to get up, because they were going into the forest to fetch wood. She gave each of them a little piece of bread and told them there's something for dinner, but not to eat it, not before then, for they will not get anything else until that time. Gretel eagerly took the bread under her apron, as Hansel had the pebbles in his pocket. Then they all set out on their way to the forest. They had walked for a short time. Hansel stood still and peeked back at the house. He did it again and again. Father asked Hansel, "What are you looking at there?" "Just pay attention for you, and don't forget how to use your legs." Hansel soon had to come up with something. "Ah, Father, I'm looking at the little white cat that's sitting up on the roof. He wants to say goodbye to me." Samra said, "You fool, that is not your little cat. That is the morning sun, which is shining on the chimneys." Well, Hansel had to come up with an excuse, because he was not looking back at the cat, but had been throwing one of the little white pebble stones out of his pocket on the road. When he had reached the middle of the forest, Father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire, that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together as a little hill of the brushwood was lighted. There, see, more of the wood they had. So the father lighted the wood, and the flames were burning very high. It was all around the wood very hot. They all looked cozily into the fire. Just imagine a big fire in front of you that makes you feel warm to the core. How wonderful the feeling. Just imagine the flames going up in the sky. The woman said, "Now, children, let's lay down by the fire and rest." Your father and I will go back in the forest and cut some more wood. When we come back, we will fetch you. Both of them headed off as Hansel and Gretel were feeling drowsy by the fire. Soon noon came, and each took a piece of the bread. They heard the strokes of the wood axe. They thought it was their father nearby. It was not an axe, however, but a branch, which he had fastened to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards, and as they had been sitting alone for such a long time, their eyes closed with fatigue, and they fell asleep. Just imagine falling asleep near the warm fire. How soothing it is, how it carries you away. When they woke up, it was already dark of night. Gretel, she began to cry. She heard all the sounds from the forest, an owl hooting, cracking of branches, animals skittering away. Oh, Hansel, how are you going to get out of the forest now? Hansel knew. He comforted her and he said, just wait a little. Wait till the moon has risen. We will find our way. So they waited. Gretel, very worried, but confident that her brother knew what he was doing. So Hansel, he took his little sister by the hand, and they followed the pebbles. They shone like newly coined silver pieces. They showed them the way home. They walked all night long. By the break of day, they arrived at their father's house. They knocked on the door. The woman opened it and saw it was Hansel and Gretel. Amazed at the sight of them, she just said, "You naughty children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all." The father, however, he rejoiced. It had cut him to the heart to leave them behind. Not long after that, food was scarce again. And the children, they heard their mother saying one evening that everything was eaten again. They only had one loaf left, and that was the end of it. The children had to go. We will take them farther into the wood, so that they will not find their way out again. There is no means of saving ourselves. The man's heart was heavy. He thought it was better to share the last mouthful with the children. But the woman, she wouldn't listen. She would not listen to anything he had to say. He scolded and reproached him. She said that he had to be wise, like he did the first time. He had to do a second time. But like before, the children were awake as well, and they overheard the conversation again. Hansel, he got up again, and like before, he picked up the pebbles. But little did he know that the woman had locked the door this time, so he couldn't get out. Just imagine the boy standing at the door, wanting to take the pebbles, but it was locked. Just the look on his face. Imagine. He went back to his sister, trying to comfort her. Told her not to cry and sleep quiet. The Lord, He will help us in the morning. No, the next morning, the woman came and took the children out of their beds. Again, she gave them a piece of bread, but it was smaller than the first time. Hansel, he crumbled this in his pocket. And while they were going to the forest, he stood still from time to time. They threw a tiny bit of the food on the ground. Hansel, why do you stop and look around? His father said. Hansel said, I'm looking back at my little pigeon, sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me. The woman said, Fool, that is not your pigeon. There's the morning sun that is shining on the chimney. But Hansel, he used that time to throw crumbs on the path. Now, the woman led the children deeper and deeper into the dark forest. Never before they had been there. It was so dark. The smell was different as well. The sounds were more eerie, not at all friendly. When they came at a clearing, they made a fire again, a big fire. Mother again told them to sit there, and when they were tired, they could sleep. They would again go into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening when they were done, they would come and fetch them away. When it was noon, Gretel, she shared a piece of bread with Hansel because he no longer had bread, because he used it to make a path back home. So they were eating on a bit of food, food, looking into the fire, and the warmth of the fire made them fall asleep again. The evening passed. No one came. And the children, they did not wake until it was pitch black. And the fire was out. Hansel, he comforted his sister. He told her to wait until the moon rose, because then they would see the crumbs of bread again. So they waited and waited. The moon came out again, so they started looking around for the crumbs. None were found. All the birds had picked them up. Hansel told Gretel, we shall soon find a way. But they didn't. They kept walking all night, and next day, from morning till evening. Just imagine 2 scared children walking in a dark forest where they had never been before. Very hungry, very thirsty. Nothing to eat. Luckily, they found a few berries that grew on the ground. They became weary, so weary, their legs wouldn't carry them anymore. So they lay down beneath a tree and they fell asleep. By now, it was 3 mornings since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again with renewed energy. This time, they would find a way back. But all they did was get deeper into the forest. If help did not come soon, they would die of hunger and weariness. That day, when it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a piece of wood. She sang so delightfully. They stood still and listened to it. The song filled their hearts with joy, and when it was over, the bird spread its wings and flew away. They decided to follow the bird, and they reached a little house. When they approached the little house, they saw it was built of bread covered with cakes, but that the windows were of clear sugar. Whoever made that house sure had a good meal. I think it's okay to eat a bit of the roof. And you, Gretel, you can eat some of the window. It will taste sweet. Hansel, he reached up above and he broke a bit of the roof and tried to taste it. Gretel, she leans against the window and she nibbled at the panes. They were so busy with filling their tummies that they did not hear that the house was not empty. There was someone inside. A soft voice cried from inside the house. Nibble, nibble, gnaw. Who is nibbling at my little house? The children were startled. Did you hear that right? They thought it was the wind and they would just continue eating. Hansel really liked the taste of the roof and he downed a great piece of it. Gretel, she pushed out the whole of one round window pane. She sat down and enjoyed herself. Suddenly, the door opened and a woman as old as the hills on crutches came out, creeping. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. The woman, however, she nodded her head and said, "Oh, dear children, who has brought you here? But do go in, stay with me, no harm shall happen to you." Just imagine a very old lady living alone in the woods, and that friendly. They were not worried at all. They were so hungry and their tummies were being filled. She took them both by the hand and she led them into her little house. Good food was set before them. Milk and pancakes, sugar apples, nuts, pies, the sweetest of berries, whipped cream, all their hearts desired. They filled their tummies to the fullest. Afterwards, 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen. Hansel and Gretel lay down in them. They really thought they were in heaven. Now, the old woman, she had only pretended to be so kind. In fact, she was a wicked witch who lay in wait for children, and she had only built that little house of bread so she could entice children, and when a child would fall into her power, she would kill it, cook it, and eat it. It was a feast day. Witches, they have red eyes. They cannot see far, but they have a keen sense of, like beasts. They are aware when humans are drawn near. So when Hansel and Gretel came into the neighborhood, she kinda laughed with malice. Told to herself, oh, they shall not escape in the morning. When the children were awake, she was already up. She watched them sleeping all night. They looked so pretty, with plump and rosy cheeks. It would be a very dainty mouthful. She seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him to a little stable and locked him behind a grated door. He could scream all he wanted, it would not help him. She went to Gretel. She shook her till she woke and cried to get up and fetch some water so she could cook something good for her, the butter. The butter was in the stable outside and was supposed to be made fat. When he is fat, she would eat him. Gretel, she began to weep bitterly, but it was in vain. She was forced to do what the wicked witch told her to. The best food was cooked for poor Hansel. Gretel could do nothing but crab shells every morning. Just imagine knowing what lies ahead, but yet the house filled with such tasteful scents. The taste of pancake, sweets, all sugary treats. Every morning she would go to the stable and cry with Hansel. She would tell him, stretch out your finger so I can touch you. The woman also got out to the stable. She also felt him. But he knew what she was up to, so she would just show her a bone. Since she could not see, she thought it was Hansel's finger, and was amazed that there was no way of fattening him. Even 4 weeks had gone by this time, and he still remained thin. She was getting impatient, and she did not want to wait longer. She told Gretel to bring her some water. Either Hansel would be fat or lean tomorrow. It wouldn't matter. She would kill him, cook him. The little sister was so slow in fetching the water. The tears flowed down her cheeks. She prayed the Lord to help them. She cried to the wild beasts in the forest. She cried that they would devour them before the witch would, because they would die together. The old crone said, "Keep your nose down. Don't help you at all." In the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang out the cauldron with the water and light a fire. The crone said, "We will bake first. I have heated the oven, kneaded the dough." So she pushed Gretel out of the oven, from which flames of the fire were already darting, creeping. The witch told her to check if the fire was properly heated, so they could put the bread in. Once Gretel was inside, she intended to shut the door and let her bake in it. Then she would eat her too, but Gretel saw what she had in mind. She told her, "I don't know how to do that." "How can I get inside there?" Mom said, "Well, the door's big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." She didn't think further, and she simply crept up, thrust her head in the oven. Gretel was smart. She gave the crone a little push. It drove her far into the oven, and she just shut the iron door, fastened the bolt. The witch began to howl horribly, but Gretel, she ran away. And the witch, she was burned to death. Just imagine that horrible stench of human flesh burning. The stench in the room, it was disgusting. She did not pay attention. Gretel was fixed on helping Hansel. She was running like a lightning bolt to Hansel, opening his little stable. She cried to Hansel, "We are saved. We are safe, brother. The old witch is dead." Hansel, he sprang out like a bird from his cage. When the door opened, he rejoiced. They embraced each other and danced about, kissing each other and hugging. Nothing to fear anymore. They went into the witch house and they looked around. The place was theirs after all now. They kept looking and looking. And what did they find? In every corner there were chests filled with pearls and jewels. No, they were far better than bells, said Hansel. He thrust them in the pockets, whatever he could, and Gretel did the same. She told him, "Let's get off. Let's get out of this witch forest." And he did. After about 2 hours, they came to a great stretch of water. Just imagine all the water. They couldn't cross that. It was too deep. Felt cold. Hansel said, "I see no foot plank, no bridge." They saw a white duck swimming. "I don't think that's a fairy," Gretel said. "But I will still ask her to help us." She cried, "Little duck, little duck." So Hansel and Gretel are waiting there. They never saw a plank or a bridge inside to take them across. She asked the duck, "Can you take us on your back across?" And the duck came over. Somehow he grew bigger, just enough for the children to sit on his back. The children did not ponder about this. They eagerly stepped on the back of the duck. Hansel told Gretel, "Just sit by him." She said, "Are you sure? Isn't that too heavy for the little duck? What if she would just bring us across one by one?" And to be sure, they did like that. The duck carried them over, one by one. Once across, they started walking again. And the scents changed. They became familiar. They looked at the trees. They recognized patches. They said, "We are someplace familiar." And from afar, they could see their father's house. Happy as they were, they began to run and rush into the parlor. They threw themselves around their father's neck. The father, he had not known one happy hour since he had left his children in the forest. The woman, however, she was dead. Gretel, she emptied her pockets. Pearls and precious stones. They ran across the room. Hansel, he drew a handful, and another handful, and another handful out of his pockets, and added to them. All anxiety came to an end, and from that day forward, they lived together in perfect harmony and happiness. They no longer had a day without food, without decent clothing, and they lived happily ever after, growing up as two wonderful children with a father who loves them very, very